months, so.
But you're here today, and we have some awesome, I don't know about you, but like in chapter 11, I found like a ton of little nuggets in there of information.
Mhm.
Kind of like, so that first example of where he talks about the magic of smiling on page 127.
I know.
Wasn't that amazing?
That was amazing. So, fun fact, where I used to work before was not a place that was happy and joyful, and the people there, were not, they didn't come to that place to be connected to each other. They had personal issues, and it was a struggle. And I decided when I came to work where I work now that I was not going to be like that. Like, my mindset was going to be positive and forward focused, and so it automatically made me smile. And I realized, like, in the first week, I met everybody, I remembered people's names, and I think it helped me just put that smile, just made me forge some better relationships, which helped me feel more positive in my energy.
Yeah.
It was almost like I felt like I had a new superpower, where it took every ounce of energy I had to do that, or if you smiled, they'd look at you like, what's wrong with you?
Yeah, and to tie this back into some of the work that Spencer does, when Bob and I went to his energy recharge event in Las Vegas, he actually talked about just smiling actually just instantly lifts your mood. And so, it was interesting to see, him discussing this in the manifestation process, and how, um, because I mean, not just your mood, but that's also tied to your frequency, right?
Right. I was just gonna say that you feel like you're vibing just like way up here, when automatically sometimes I'll be driving, and driving is not a time when people really think about smiling, but I just think about getting to work. I think about like how I'm gonna feel when I get there. So I smile. And it just helps lift, and you can almost feel the vibration moving up into you.
Well, okay, so you and I are incredibly energy sensitive, so other people might think of it differently, but I don't know about you, but I can always tell when someone's being fake with me, right?
Right. 100%.
I might not always say something, but it's like I
Yeah, because you're nice.
right.
You don't want to put
But
that energy out there. I got it.
and I also see it from a higher perspective now. Um, I see it as like, okay, they're not comfortable in themselves, so this is why they're acting this way. Or they are, they have a feeling of lack, whether that be, lack of opportunities, or lack of self-confidence, or
Control. Sometimes it's just about control.
right. And so they're dealing with their shit.
Yeah.
And I get that. I've been there myself. So I mean, that's not to say I'm going to put up with it, but I'll be a little bit more understanding, and I'm not going to call them out for, being totally full of shit.
Mhm.
Because I know
Right.
they're going through stuff, and that's their journey, right? But I can always feel when somebody's being fake. So, when it is a genuinely sincere compliment, it can be felt. I can feel.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And don't mean to interrupt, because
No, go ahead.
like
We're
amazing.
bantering. It's just us.
So there's one person that I work with, and her energy this week has been really low.
Yeah.
And what seems to just real low self-esteem, dealing with severe grief and loss in her life.
Mm.
And like you said, you can sit back and see why they're doing the things they're doing or whatever. But I find that where flattery comes in, from me, if it's genuine, like, hey, I really love that top you're wearing. I think it's beautiful. I find things that I truly feel, and then I share that with her, that starts to get her out of that low vibe, that starts to get her out of that, just kind of makes her feel a little more validated.
Yeah.
Not that I think right now she needs friends to do that, to help her through that while she's going through this. But I can't do it if there's nothing I can see that I like, I just have to shut my mouth. Yeah,
Yeah.
it can't be genuine. If it can't
Right.
be genuine, it can't come out of my mouth, is how I feel.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's when it is genuine, I feel like it can actually be a superpower, which is what I think where he was going with in the book, is you can
Absolutely.
use it to
Yeah.
your advantage, right?
Yeah. That's why, I've never I haven't done that well in the corporate world because, I
Well,
mean,
you're in a bullpen. I'm not.
well, yeah, and there typically is this culture of people who kiss ass, right? To get ahead.
You don't even have to talk to me about who they are. I know. Okay. I
And-
love them just as much, right? You still
right.
have to want the best for them. But yes,
But
I,
that's an example of insincere flattery, right? And
mm,
I don't know. It just I have been on the receiving end of that, and it just feels icky to me.
yeah, it's not genuine. And then you really have to think about how does that, well, when something's not genuine, or I just feel like they like me for a reason that's not about me, it's, that they want something or they want to get close to somebody else because of me, it brings my vibe down, and it makes me not want to be around them. I have to pull
Right.
myself away. So I start to isolate. There's patterns and signs, and I see myself looping sometimes into that pattern. And I've got to get off the wheel so that I can steer the ship, if you will.
Yeah, and let's see, going back to, yeah, so it's talked about being at peace. So that was on page 127 and 128.
Mm-hmm.
Because, just to understand that no individual problem is more powerful than the collective harmonious forces that the world constantly is moving forward to achieve that perfect balance. And it goes along with something a YouTuber I follow also kind of said about energy is constantly trying to balance itself out.
Mm-hmm.
And so, when we get way off course in one direction, it's gonna do the opposite swing like even further than it needs to because it's trying to reach that equilibrium.
Pull you back in. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
And
and I
that's why, especially in the manifestation process, when we kind of set our sights on something, sometimes other things have to kind of fall apart for that to happen because it's trying to reach that balancing point.
I forget which, there were parts of it that just didn't, it felt icky to me, right?
Mhm.
There were things I felt like I didn't really, weren't me inside of me. I'll give you an example. Like, um, I taught group fitness classes for so many years, right?
Mhm.
35 years. And part of the culture of a professional group fitness instructor who goes on and does fitness videos and things like that, there's sort of an ego balance, right? You got to have a little, and it's almost like you're in competition. You can't cheer for other people. You're alone on this island. And I've learned you can't, that's not who I am.
Mm.
I'm all about let's be friends, let's be a team, we're better together. And that part of teaching for me and being the best, it wasn't it intrinsically, that's not really what I wanted. But
Yeah.
that's where the course of my career took me because that was the next level. But it almost was painful to get there. And so I think understanding that compass is really important because, like, being at peace allows you when you're not on that track, right?
Yeah.
You don't have that peace in your life.
Yeah.
And so zip, pull you back in. So if you go woo, way, way off to the left, yeah, you're gonna have a big arc. You're gonna boomerang all the way, and it'll snap you, and things will happen in your life to pull you back. For me, it was a really bad knee injury. No more teaching. That's how I look at what happened to me now. I used to say,
Right.
oh, it was bad. It happened. I could never do this again. But part of me was like, yeah, now I don't have to compete anymore.
Wow.
That's awesome.
That's really insightful. I had no idea that that's what the culture was.
Mhm. Oh, Yasmin, it was bad.
Yeah.
It was bad. And even friends that I still have, well, it shouldn't, doesn't surprise me at all. I've had three friends, very young, um, all have strokes in the last, I don't know, 5 years. My age, they're still, fitness instructors, really healthy people, but the stress of where they are in their career, it was too much. Their body couldn't take it. And again, maybe it didn't follow their truth, right?
Right. Right.
You're physically, if you don't set yourself up mentally, you bet you're gonna feel it physically.
Well, it also goes back to what we're talking about boundaries, right? If you don't know who you are, and, part of Spencer's story was, he that's was when he reached his lowest point, was he couldn't even tell you if he liked chocolate cake or not, because he
Hmm.
was living other people's truths and not his own. So, I mean, if we don't know who we are, I mean, how on earth are we even going to create boundaries? Because,
Yeah, you don't know yourself.
yeah,
You're gonna be like a kid learning those, this is hot, don't touch that, like where's the boundary there?
yeah.
So
I thought I pulled that out. I think it was like around,
I forget where it was.
oh, it
On
was
the other hand, it
in
said,
the dark side, taking action, on
mm-hmm,
page 144 and 145, and talking about how, the universe works um in infinite possibilities, right?
mm-hmm,
And I think I touched on this on one of the other classes, but um if you go and you study quantum physics, so you have a whole wave of possibilities, and they're infinite.
mm-hmm.
Now they all have different probabilities. So you know a spaceship landing on my house has like almost a zero probability of happening.
Really, I don't know. It's a nice house.
Well, yeah, it's me. It's me we're talking about, but
Say,
just
now for
go with
my house,
it.
maybe.
Just go with it. Um, so there's a very small probability there, whereas If I go to work, I'm going to see a coworker, that is almost a 100% probability, right?
Mhm.
And so there's all these, it's a wave of probabilities. And so everything's possible. It's just one thing, maybe an incredibly small probability. But when we shift our focus, that actually, and this has all been proven through, I don't know if you studied the double slit experiment or not,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
it's been proven that as soon as you put your focus on the probability that you want, it collapses the wave and it turns it into a particle, and that is the basis for manifestation in the physical,
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
it's no longer a wave, it's actually a physical particle, and
Mhm.
that's what starts your manifestation. And depending on the percentage of that probability, it's like how many things have to be orchestrated for that to come into fruition.
Mhm.
So that's where our resistance and our patience and our trust in the process comes into play. It's like, okay, well, this is a big ask, right? But it's not impossible. It's just that so many more things need to line up for that to happen. But
Right.
I trust that it will happen.
Right. And I think that particle draws you along that wave. It like guides you to the next thing you need to do to get
Yes.
there. Look at some people who, I don't know, some people who started out, bef- they liked acting, but, it was just fun for them, whatever. Then all of a sudden they get like really focused on, I want to become a star. Jim Carrey, for example.
Mm,
Jim Carrey,
it's a
like
great example.
yeah, right? Like,
Mhm.
he would sit there and mantra and say, I am a great actor and I am making this much money in a movie. And he saw this and he never gave up on that. That particle got him to the next place and the next place and the next audition. And look at him now, he
Yeah.
can pick and choose what he wants to do.
Yeah.
And he's doing what is true, what's intrinsic in him.
And that actually is an excellent example of, another point I pulled out was, where he talked a little bit about, so it's kind of, so we have this trust-based process, but it's a tricky balance because you want to be able to just hold that focus on what you want no matter what, just like Jim Carrey did. Say those mantras, actually become it, so that you're actually feeling like that person that's successful, because that's what's going to draw it in. But you also don't want to obsess, because if you start to move into that obsession, you're no longer in the trust-based process, because you're worried about when it's going to happen, and
Mhm.
you're actually shifting yourself into, that feeling of I don't have it.
Mhm.
And so that's shifting you into the um, lack of it
Right.
frequency. So it's tricky.
There's a balance. So,
you know
yeah, that's
for
the
it to
cool
happen.
thing about manifesting. I was talking to somebody about, I'm doing this course and it's super awesome and I'm learning so much. And they're like, well, isn't manifesting just like wishing for things and then getting it? And I'm like, no,
No.
it's guiding you to who you were meant to be, basically. Like you decide what you want, and then when to manifest it, it's like you're using, I love this, use the force to get there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I just think that a lot of people misinterpret manifesting.
Yeah, it's almost like, I'm not a surfer. I've never jumped on a surfboard ever. But I would
Fun, but yeah.
imagine it's kind of like you kind of get in that zone, right? And you're like, okay, everything's moving, everything's flowing. And you kind of have an idea of your path, but you don't know exactly. So you're trusting that you're going to get there, and you know there's going to be some bumps and twists and turns, but you're constantly getting feedback, and it's like, if you make a wrong turn, it's like, oh well, that's
Mhm.
that's
Whoopsie.
not where we want to go. So
Back out of here.
let's course correct.
Yep. Oops. This way.
Yeah. And I had known this, but I had not actually been aware of the extent that Adolf Hitler was into the occult.
I know I'd heard about that before. I'm like, what? I didn't know the depth of it though.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was really interesting. And, you know, for, I've been open to a lot of different types of belief systems throughout my life because I was raised by my grandmother, who was an agnostic,
Hmm.
and my mother, who was obsessed with religion hopping. So she was Baptist, she was Catholic, she was Christian, she
Sounds like
was
my mother.
she studied Hebrew at one point because she was into Judaism, and then she ended up doing a lot with self-realization,
Hmm.
and then also Rosicrucianism. And so that's where she kindly landed in more of the metaphysical new age stuff. But from a very early age, I was exposed to all these different religions, right? So i I understood that they were all basically the same at their core teachings.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that's not to say that everyone practices them like they were
No,
designed.
no. And like some people take things, well, again, like how he says in the book, obsession can be, it can work against you. I get frustrated with people who focus on one passage in the Bible or, one aspect of a religion. And that's like all that's their, I don't want to say it's their truth, but that's what they feel is, the essence of the religion. And anybody else with any other idea or any other thing, is wrong. That's where I have, it's like, oh my God, that Bible is open to interpretation as far as I'm concerned,
Oh,
right?
and
So
and
all
who
religion is.
I know, and who are they? Because I mean, there are scholars that have made it their life's work to study, to interpret these
Mhm.
texts, right? And they can't even agree.
No, they can't agree. I know.
So, it's all, but if you take the basic energy frequency of the Christ consciousness, um just kind of what was trying to be conveyed there of basic goodness, and putting out a frequency of being service to others and not so much service to self. And
Mhm.
that's where you can kind of see these tools. They're just tools. They're not evil or dark, but they can be used for dark purposes. And obviously Hitler was a horrific example of that. But there again, I see a lot of these people that use these things um, for negative purposes. They typically, if you evaluate them, they kind of have that victim mindset.
Mhm.
They're in lack, they're in survival mode, they are in service to self, and they can't see the bigger picture of service to others. And y-
Or they create that that lack mindset in other people too.
Yeah.
You know, and then and kind of prey on them as well.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that's kind of where Hitler went, you know.
Well, yeah, and how much deep insecurity he must have had in his own self
Mm-hmm.
to go where he went.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, infinite
Because
insecurity.
a healthy, confident, self-assured individual does not do something like that.
Off with their head, off with their no.
I mean, you've got to be seriously damaged.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, first of all, our society doesn't
Culture,
benefit from people who are whole, right?
right?
You know,
Well, yeah, 100%. And people are really quick to think that they're trying that some if someone's nice to them or helpful, they're going to get scammed.
yeah, yeah. And because that's the majority of what is out there, what is being pushed in our media.
Yeah, that's our culture.
Yeah. How are you going to sell somebody an alarm system for their home if, everybody feels abundant and they wouldn't even think of robbing each other?
Mm-hmm. Right. What a world that would be. I want to live there.
I know. Hey, it's my goal. It's my goal. I'm gonna
Let's
change the
do it.
world one person
Let's
at a
do
time.
it. We'll have it the National Don't Lock Your Front Door Night.
Yeah.
I mean, if I got outsourced tomorrow, I'd be sad. I'd miss what I do, but that doesn't mean I couldn't pick up and do it elsewhere.
Well, yeah, because you're not, first of all, you're not caught up in the chase for validation, right?
Mm-mm,
You
no.
know your worth. And with knowing your worth, any other employer would be lucky to have you. So
Well, right back at you. But I think that's why you and I are like, eh,
yeah.
I like I like who you know, mostly who I work with and those that I just feel do not gel with me or I just don't have a connection. I wish them well. I want the best for them.
Yeah.
That's all I can do. Hope they
Yeah.
have a great life.
See ya.
Yeah.